go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Did you have any other public service announcements for upcoming programs, or would you like to share those at the end?
We'll do that at the end.
Okay,
Just so
very
that it's
good.
fresh in everybody's mind. All right.
Awesome. Very good. Well, thanks for having me. I'm very excited. I've always enjoyed it when I come to Schaumburg. You guys have such a beautiful location. So now I will just have to imagine that we're all there together since we can't be there together. Um, And I do have to say, I preferred today's commute. You know, it was a little shorter of a drive than it typically is when I'm coming up to see you guys. So thanks for coming this evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to talk about organizing your big projects tonight. So if you've been to a Clear the Clutter class with me before at the library, it is similar, but there is some more and more specific content to those big projects. Because obviously big projects can feel very overwhelming, but they're very rewarding if we can get them done. I can't decide if I'm hot or cold, so you guys have to bear with me. It got a little cooler this evening or today again, didn't it? So, oh well. But it's supposed to be warm again tomorrow. So if you want to employ any of the tips and ideas that you got today for projects tomorrow and this week, I think spring is officially here. So we're going to talk about, like I said, big projects, and I'm going to start sharing my screen with you, and I will share the handout that I prepared, and it would be the one that is also, you will have received it in your inbox. So I'm going to share it as we go along, just so you can kind of see where we are. And I did share my recycling guide in the chat window, because I'm going to refer to that this evening probably a couple times. Very often we know we need to get rid of things, but we just don't know how or where. And so I have quite a number of resources for the Chicago area and even greater Illinois for sending things on their way in a responsible recycling kind of way. So I did share that, and if you want to check that out, that's on my website. And I updated it even just today. So I updated it about once a week if I get new resources to share. Today's resource that I shared was a place that in Wooddale, Illinois, that recycles paint, which is a common question I get, is what do I do, especially in those garage projects or basement projects, maybe a crawl space. What do I do with those 10 cans of old paint? I know I'm supposed to do something responsible with them, but I don't know what it is. So like I said, check out that resource guide, because there's usually some ideas and solutions to some of your problems of sending things on their way. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to share my screen, and it will be very similar, just with some more page breaks for what you would receive via email. From the library. So here we are. If you can see now, I'm sharing the top of the handout, which has my contact information if you want to email me or check out my website or find me on Twitter or Pinterest, or I'm not as busy out there as I am on my website and on Facebook, but that's how to reach me. If you have questions after tonight, or you just want to reach out to me, then I'm always welcome. I always welcome that as well. But what we have in front of us here is the handout for clutter, clearing clutter, large projects, garages, etc. Okay, so what makes these bigger projects such a challenge, right? Why are big spaces? So I say specifically garages, but again, it could be your attic, it could be your basement, it could be a crawl space. Honestly, my garage isn't too bad right now, but I could probably spend some time clearing out some things in my crawl space in the next week or two. So why is that more intimidating than just, tidying up your dresser drawers or tackling a closet or a dresser or something like that, or a kitchen cabinet? So the problem with those bigger spaces is they tend to be a catch-all. So garages especially, right? They tend to be a drop zone for everybody and anything. I know that right now in my garage, there's a few things that are not normally in my garage. One of my sons, We just kind of updated his bedroom, and he has a platform bed and no longer needs his box springs for his bed. Well, our waste management is not picking up large items right now. So right now there's a box spring in my garage. So we know that very often those bigger spaces, because they are bigger, they tend to just accumulate stuff that people drop because there's room for it. That's where it ends up being. The other thing is everybody uses the space. So I have 5 people that live in my house. Um, and 4 of us are grown adults. My adult children are 20 and 22. And then I have a 15-year-old. So pretty much everybody has things that they could be using coming and going from our garage space, which means it's a very heavily used space as well, right? And because it tends to collect, it also collects the things that we don't quite want to commit to, or we don't want to necessarily find a home for inside the house. So we get kind of this conglomeration of unmade decisions and, you know, piles of things that just haven't kind of gone on to their final resting place. So it becomes a holding place for those undecisions, those undecided items. And that, when it piles up, suddenly it's become really overwhelming. And then you just want to walk away and be anywhere else, because it's just gotten so big, and you know it's going to take a while to tackle that. So the other thing, you know, volume is different. There's more surface area, there's more floor space, there's more wall area. You know, garages, a lot of times people hang things on the walls and up in the rafters. In the basement, you know, we have everything pushed up against the wall, and then people get inventive and they start a column down the middle of a large storage space. So now we've just got twice as much stuff down there. Again, it makes it very overwhelming. So when it gets that overwhelming, we kind of hesitate to want to tackle it, understandably. Okay. So the opposite of this, though, is the garages in these big spaces are really amazing. They do not get the respect that they deserve. Having a space that everybody can use, that everybody has storage, that can be multifunctional is really great. But when we use it just as haphazard storage, then it's not really serving any particular function other than a dumping ground. And that's a problem. Okay. So they are, like I said, they sometimes serve double or even triple duty for family members. I keep threatening to go on and have my my Zoom calls or my webinars out in the garage, because I can actually go there and close the door, and maybe I wouldn't be interrupting anybody and they wouldn't interrupt me. So who knows, maybe I'll be giving these from out there sometime soon. So truly we want to think about our garage, right? Is the primary goal for organizing our garage is to get rid of our stuff. And the main purpose, the main function specifically of a garage is supposed to be car storage. So I used to tell the joke, or I would often ask if we were all together at the library, I would peer into my crystal ball and I would say, I know exactly where you were on February 2nd, 2011. Not because I'm magic, but because there was a blizzard that day. And so we were all stuck in our homes. So I know where we were. We're all stuck in our homes too now, but for a different reason. But the question then I would ask is, where was your car? Was it outside? This is your second biggest investment outside of your home. And our cars often get treated more poorly than our clutter. We let our garages fill up with clutter, and then we do not take care of our more important investments, and they sit outside instead of in the garage where they belong. So what we really want to do is to make room for the things that really are important, and that is going to mean clearing some clutter and taking care of, you know, getting rid of the things that are not important. But again, it's kind of intimidating. So I understand why we hesitate to do that, right? So we want to make space for the things that do matter in our garage or other large projects. We want to maybe clear some clutter. Sounds good to me, right? Maybe we can even make some money on this prospect. That's awesome. That's not necessarily the goal, but you know, if that's one of the outcomes, so be it, and that's great, right? So making money is nice, but really we're just trying to clear some clutter, right? Okay, so our next page. handy tech person. There we go. Taught me something cool today. There we go. I advanced too far. Okay. So when we are tackling these big projects to find our motivation, sometimes it's really helpful to find out why. Okay. So that goes back to those outcomes and goals that we were just talking about. Why do we want to tackle this project? Right. So what is motivating you? Can sometimes help us to stay motivated. So we need to decide that for ourselves. And like I said, sometimes it can help us to keep on track. So remember your why. Maybe it's you're tired of stumbling over things, right? And so you want to save time. You want to clear some clutter and find some organization in your big projects, in your big spaces, because you'd like to save time. You'd like to find things easier, right? Maybe we want to either save money or, like I said, maybe we want to make money. Maybe we want to have a garage sale, or maybe we want to sell some things on Facebook or, eBay or Craigslist, or I don't even know what people use these days. I use Facebook to sell things, but maybe that's your motivation, and that's a great motivation, right? So if that's your why, works for me. Maybe you need to make some space for some new things. Maybe you just need to clear out some clutter, right? So just today, my brothers and I collaborated to buy my mom a tricycle. And so she it's already been delivered. She's very excited. This is for Mother's Day and her birthday. And her motivation was to clean out a corner of her garage, obviously, to take good care of this new item that she's received that she's very excited about using. So I know that she had made a little space in the corner near the door to make that easier too. So that's a great motivator as well. Maybe you've got, something that's coming in that you do want to keep, so you're willing to make some space with those things that you don't want to keep. Okay. So, like I said, there's a direct way to make money. You can sell what you have, get ready for a garage sale, but you can also have an indirect way which is just cleaning out things. I have a client right now whose garage is very full of items from her parents' home. So her parents passed away, and the responsibility for clearing out the home fell on her shoulders. And so all of the contents of their home came to her garage and to two storage spaces. So she's paying a lot for storage right now. And so if she could clear some of that clutter, if she could find space and if she could purge some of it and store other parts of it differently, hopefully she could reclaim her space and stop paying for those storage units too, right? So that is her big why. Sometimes it's something as simple as that, and we want to take better care of our stuff, but sometimes we also want to either make money or save money by taking care of and making space in the garage. Okay. All right. There we go. So we talked about why bigger spaces are a challenge, and then we talked about why we are tackling this project, right? Now, right now, our why could be, I know I need to do it, and I have the time right now because of this social distancing. I'm not, doing the other things that I would be doing. So, hey, it's spring, let's tackle that project. That is a great motivator. Let's do it while we have the chance. Okay. So, but let's break it down into, what exactly we might be parting with as we tackle these big projects, right? And that's a conversation then about clutter. Okay. So what is clutter? What does it have to do with these big projects? What does it have to do with being organized? Okay. So as you're looking around your garage or your basement or your crawl space, what you're trying to identify is anything that you don't need, use, or love and is not serving you, is not loving you back right now. Okay. So if you have something that's sitting in your big spaces, like I said, garage, basement, attic, and and we don't need it, we don't use it, we don't love it, we're not particularly attached to it, right? And it's really not doing anything for us, then that's clutter. And maybe it's time for it to go. If the point of this project is to, clear clutter and restore order and make some space for things that we do need, then let's purge that clutter, right? Why? Because clutter clouds what we do need and use and value. So if clutter is anything we don't need, use, or value, then we want to make room for the things that we do need and we do use and we do value. It makes us feel overwhelmed. It's just a disturbing visual when you come into that space that you're working in, and it almost hurts to look at when it's all cluttered and a hot mess. Now, sometimes we can walk past it and not see it at all, which I guess that's okay. But very often we've waited all winter to tackle that project. And now that it's warmer, it's time to really, reduce that visual clutter and take care of that project, right? So what we can do when we clear clutter is we get to what's real, we get to what's necessary, and then there's a whole lot left to actually, a whole lot less left to actually take care of. So that saves us time and money and clears up space for us and lets us honor the stuff that we do need and use and love. So this is what we're working towards, and that's a good thing. Okay. All right. So how, right? How do we do this? That's the big question. Okay. All right. So if you are ready to tackle this project, you need a plan. We all need a plan. Okay. So the biggest mistakes that most people make when they organize a space is they start without a plan and they buy storage containers without actually knowing what they need. Okay, so do not go shopping just yet either. Now is not the time. If you're trying to clear clutter, now is not the time to go buy more stuff. Okay, maybe somewhere in the process, but not just yet. Okay, so we really need to craft a plan and not shop. But what we do when we craft a plan, in my clutter classes, I talk a lot about clipboards. I love a good clipboard, right? So, I have the handout that you guys have in front of you right here. But everybody feels, I know it's silly, but it's true. Everybody feels more empowered, I think, when they're holding a clipboard. Now, it could also be a notebook. It could be a dry erase board. It could be anything you want it to be. But what we need to do is we need to actually start writing things down so we can have it. Now, I'm a big tech person. I love technology. So if I had a project like this, I might also start jotting notes in my phone. I use something called Evernote, but you could certainly open up just a note in your phone, or you could use Google Docs and you could open it up and just start jotting things down in there too. And then you can have it with you and take it everywhere. So mostly, depending or regardless of how you like to keep your information, we need to craft our plan. Okay. So how do we do that? Right. So if we are sorry about that. There we go. Shadow is bugging me back there. If we were doing more than one project, I might have you walk around your home, and stop in every room and kind of jot down what you'd like to see happen in those spaces from an organizational standpoint. Well, the same holds true when we are crafting our plan for these big projects. Okay. So what we want to do is, without moving a thing, right? So the first thing we want to do is maybe we just go and stand in the garage and look around for a little bit, right? So what we can do when we do that is we start to identify some of the areas that we want to attack. We might look around and decide where we want to start. We might look around and see that there are things that are already ready to go, which is great. That would be wonderful. Maybe in a couple of weeks, when I go out to my garage, I look around and say, oh, that's right. Waste management is now picking up large items again. I can finally put this mattress out by the curb. Or I've gotten questions at the presentations that I've been giving via Zoom recently, because so many donation centers or donation destinations like Goodwill or St. Vincent de Paul or things like that, those drop boxes are closed right now because obviously there's not a way to process that kind of stuff, the donations and things like that. So I do know that in some places our big areas are being filled up with bags of donations that we have already made decisions on from all their smaller projects in our home, and now they've kind of settled in the garage or in the basement or something like that. So I recognize that might be the case, and I'm sorry. I know that's frustrating. You've done the hard work. So if you just want to set those aside for now and then make a note in your calendar on your to-do list for hopefully soon, early June at this point, I believe, um, to, drop off donations at the library or I don't know, I should have asked Annie about that. Um, or Goodwill or, school supplies, or who knows what you've got going on. But sometimes we just need to make sure that those are part of our plan for, re-entry when that starts back up in June. But if you do have things that are piled up, go ahead and set them aside. That you've already made decisions on those. And you might just, set those outside the garage door as you're tackling this big project. If there are things to go that can be disposed of now, however, such as recycling or garbage or, things like that, then absolutely that can still go, and that should go sooner rather than later. So that's all part of your plan. You can start jotting down those things as you look around your space, either your garage or your basement. And you can start jotting those things down. And as you do that, congratulations, you are crafting your plan. So the other things that we might want to think about is if it is a big project, we might want to set the date for it because we might want to enlist aid or need to set up a dumpster or set up a donation pickup. Maybe you want to have people come and help you. That's that enlist aid, item number D. Or maybe, I know that in our household, things are a lot different than they were even a couple months ago, but many of us are still in school or working during the day, during the week. So we would probably still tackle a big project on a weekend. Maybe you don't have that limitation right now, but I know that sometimes, like I said, we would still, if we were going to tackle a big project, we would probably still plan to do it together, but on a weekend, a few days ahead of now. So set the date, set the appointment, donation pickup, etc. Okay. Purge those easy items that are slated to leave. Very early on in my organizing career, I worked on a garage on the south side, far south. And the garage looked very, very crowded and full. And it turns out that almost all of the boxes that were in the garage that were left by a contractor for a kitchen project were empty. And so what we thought was going to take about 6 hours took about 2, because as soon as I broke down all of those empty cardboard boxes, so much space was revealed, and all we had to do was bundle it up and put it outside. So that was kind of cool. So that would be one of those easy items slated to leave, right? Enlist aid, like I said, is on that list. If you're storing things for other people, maybe it's time to call them to pick up their stuff. I have I had a story from a participant in a class. She still had her ex-husband's car, like convertible that he had been working on, in her garage. So she really wanted to be able to park her own car in her own garage. And so I said, okay, I think maybe there's a phone call that needs to be made. And she said, yeah, I do too. So, maybe there's things that other people need to come and pick up and own their clutter and take it back to their house so you can make some progress on your spaces. And the other thing I want you to do is start to assemble your supplies. So we do know that some things will probably be going out in the garbage or recycling or to be donated. And so I do recommend grabbing those garbage bags. I mentioned here on the list to use both black and white. And the reason for that is you can write on a white kitchen garbage bag with a black Sharpie, and you can denote what's inside and what the destination is. So if you're going through things and you come around, you've got a bag of children's clothing to drop off at your sister's house, or you've got some books to, take to the local preschool or whatever that is. Once we have those bagged up, sometimes we can forget what's in those bags. So I do like white kitchen garbage bags because we can write on them before we fill them. It's so much easier. It's true. And then the other thing with those white kitchen garbage bags is if you've got really heavy items, you won't fill those bags quite so full that you can't lift them. Very often when we get those really big black kitchen garbage bags, even the contractor bags, they're great. They're very thick and they're very strong, but we can overfill them until we can't lift them and maneuver them anymore. So having both sizes is very helpful. Other things that we might need would be that clipboard and a pen, maybe a Sharpie marker and some Post-it notes. My favorite way to label containers, actually, I apologize. I'm getting notifications. Okay, is to, I do apologize. So when I label containers, sometimes I have to label containers that might get damp or dusty. Maybe they're in a garage or an attic or a basement or again, a crawl space, who knows? So what I have found after many, many years of trial and error, my favorite way to label containers is with a Post-it note written on with a Sharpie. And then once I've labeled, written 2 labels, one goes on an end of the container and one goes on the side. Do not label the lid, because as soon as you stack something else on top, you can't see what's on the top anymore. So we label the side and the end, and then we cover that Post-it note over with clear packing tape. And that keeps it from pulling off, and it makes it a little more permanent. Now, it's still very easy to pull off if you change your mind or if the contents of the box container changes, but it has been what I have found works the best. So I do usually have all of those things with me when I go to clients' homes. So I recommend that you guys would have that kind of stuff together too. Okay, plastic zip ties, small containers for little things, cleaning supplies, etc. Okay. And then a final thing as we're making our plan is I would like you to remember that we need to be careful, right? We need to employ safety, especially in garages and basements, because very often there's, you know, heavy items or sharp implements or things like that. So I always, you know, work with closed-toed shoes and socks. Sometimes I'll have work gloves. I usually have like actually 3 different levels of gloves that I can use. Might need a mask if it gets dusty. Garages get very dusty as we organize. So you might want a mask, not for any kind of virus, but just to keep the dust out. Maybe even a hat, maybe even a hard hat, a good ladder, that kind of stuff. And please take fragile things out before you start so you don't end up, you know, knocking into them by accident. Okay, so you are crafting your plan, and now we are about ready to get started, which is great. Okay, so if we were standing in your garage, that is often the question. Oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. I don't know where to start, right? Does that sound familiar? Yeah, probably. So where to begin, really just start. I know that sounds too simplistic, and it probably is, but very often we get so overwhelmed that we get analysis paralysis. We get so busy trying to figure out the exact right space to start that we never do. So honestly, sometimes we just need to jump in and rip that Band-Aid off and, you know, let's go, let's just dive in. So if you are looking for a place to start, very often, if I was standing in your garage or your basement or that big space with you, we would start at the door, and we could either start to the right or to the left. It's completely arbitrary. But what we would do is we would pick an area to start with, and we would slowly make our way. What we don't want to do is be a butterfly. We don't want to jump from area to area to area, especially in those big places, because you're never actually going to see the results quickly if we're just jumping around from area to area. And then you could lose motivation, you could get very distracted, and you're not going to get the job done. So having a plan and then a concerted effort as to where to start and which direction to go is really going to help you to continue to make progress in that space. A caveat with these big projects: sometimes we do not get to finish them all at once. And I know, as a reformed perfectionist myself, I really like to finish what I start. And so very often I will delay starting because I don't know how long a project's going to take. So by all means, carve out a couple hours, right? Maybe even a whole morning or an afternoon if you want. But also don't hesitate to start just because you don't know exactly how long the process will take. So sometimes we just need to say, I'm going to get as much done in the next couple hours as I can. And then if I don't get it all the way finished, I can come back next week and complete it. And that's the other benefit of picking a spot and starting and moving steadily around the space. Because if you tear everything apart, you won't be able to use the space if you can't finish it all completely today. Okay? So we want to start, we want to go ahead and start today. We don't have to be so attached to completion. We can still just be really excited about the progress that we're going to make. Okay, so keep that in mind. So this is still planning, right? Where to begin, even if you're just outlining and and thinking, that's still progress. And if you're also looking for a place to start, you could start with the place that's causing the most pain. Okay, and that could be the pile of things behind the car that hasn't been moved in a month, and we really need to, start it up and make sure the battery's okay. So, maybe that's where you start. Okay, fine, that's great. We just need to start. Okay, and then we can decide if we're going to work left to right, or clockwise around the space, or counterclockwise around the space, etc. And the other thing that I want you to remember is that destination question. So we talked about at the very beginning, sometimes we want to get rid of our stuff. Sometimes we want to make money from getting rid of our stuff. Sometimes we need to recycle some of our stuff. Okay, so there's all kinds of destinations that, especially things in a garage, for the variety of things there are, maybe there's a variety of places that they need to go. But when we start out by thinking about those destinations, we are more likely to stay motivated, and things are more likely to actually go ahead and leave. And that is good. We need that to happen if we're going to clear the clutter in these big spaces. So assigning a destination before we purge makes it much easier for us to get rid of things. If we know that clothes are going to a family member, and tools are going to Habitat for Humanity, and fill in the blank, right? It could be any of these things. You have a friend who's a master gardener who's going to come and look at your seeds in your garage. Who knows? But if you know that when you start, it's going to make it easier for you to actually get those things sent on their way. Okay, so we talked about where to begin, and that term that I used before, the start in the area that gives you the most pain, is actually from a gentleman named Barry Itzik. He's an organizer. I want to say he's in Texas, but he has a book just on organizing your garage. And so he has a process. If you like this one, it's, stow, so sort things out and weed. Okay, purge extras and brokens. Keep the best, get rid of the rest, establish a home. Okay, so these are very similar. And he also says, which is why I wanted to add this, is he also says specifically, do not empty out the entire garage. And that goes back to what I was just saying, is sometimes we don't get a chance to finish the project all at once. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I've also worked on garage projects where the client wanted everything out in the driveway, which is great. However, half the neighborhood stopped by thinking she was having a garage sale, which she wasn't. And then, of course, it started to rain. So the point is not to get everything out on the driveway, because we never know if it's going to have to stay there, and we don't know what the weather might continue to be, and we don't want the neighbors to think we're having a garage sale if we're not. So you do not necessarily want to empty the entire garage if you're tackling that big project. So I just wanted to put in a word for Barry Itzik. Like I said, he has a book, and it's very possible that our library carries it, or could order it through the network. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that one. But the process that I'm going to talk about the most is from a woman named Julie Morgenstern. And if you've come to my clutter classes before, I have mentioned her before. So this is the same process that I use for my other clutter classes, but it's applied again to these bigger projects. Okay, so these bigger spaces. Very similar to the acronym that that Barry Itzik had is Julie Morgenstern's SPACE acronym. Okay, so I have to say I use this all the time. I use it on my clients' projects. I use it on my personal projects. It makes it really easy to remember the process. And then you don't have to get that overwhelmed feeling, oh my gosh, I don't know where to start. You don't have to get that feeling, because we really can tackle every project the same way. And when we do that, we get really a lot better at it. We get to, flex our organizing muscles. We get to get good at this process. And so, like I said, I use this very process, these 5 steps all the time. We all do if we, if we kind of recognize that when we, oh yeah, I guess that is kind of how I tackled that project. I just didn't know the words for it. Well, there you go. Okay. So her acronym is SPACE. Okay. So Julie Morgenstern would tell us to sort what we have, purge what can go. A is assign a home to what's left. C is to containerize what's left, and E is to maintain or equalize is the word that she uses, okay? So we're gonna walk through that process real quick. It is 7:38, yep, we got this, okay. So very often we need to have at least 3 boxes in those bigger spaces. One, we may need more, and actually that's where those garbage bags come in handy for me, but we probably have 3 main avenues for things to go, right? So there will be things that we keep, obviously. There will be things that we toss that are just rubbish. There might be maybes, okay? And we'll talk about maybes in a little bit, but we will definitely need at least 2 or 3 boxes. And maybe your boxes, one of them is recycling, or one of them is, items to be donated to such and such, or maybe it is art to be shipped to your sister in Boston. Who knows what that is, but have those laid out near the door when you get started, because as you start to pull things apart, now you'll know where they can go, especially if they're slated to leave. Okay, so that's very helpful. Okay. Oh, label the boxes, get to work, and stay there. So what that means is, again, I don't want you to be a butterfly when we start these projects, because we can, 2 hours later, we're in the different part of the house and we don't know how we got there in the garage. We haven't made any progress. So please stay there. Sometimes what we need to do is get something to drink and leave it out there with us. Turn on some good music, anything that makes this a more positive experience is a good thing, right? Bring in friends, right? Enlist aid. Okay, so we are going to sort what's in there. And in a garage, your categories could be, seasonal decor, or seasonal like yard decorations, right? Maybe yard and outdoor implements, so your lawnmower or your gardening stuff. Maybe it's hardware or tools. Maybe it's bikes or kid toys or sporting goods. Who knows, right? Maybe you have off-season clothing storage and stuff. I don't really recommend that in the garage, but we never know what we're going to find when we are in a garage. It's very interesting. We just never know. So what we need to do is we need to start sorting it into categories. And very often what happens is we might designate the 4 corners of the garage, maybe in one corner, because that's where it seems that, more of the yard tools have gathered anyway. Okay, so when we find more yard tools, we're going to go ahead and put them over there with the other ones. Or maybe we tackle this pile and we find out that the pile, the closest one that we're working on, is mostly kid toys. Okay, well, this is the kid toy corner now, or the sporting goods or sporting equipment items, So like I said, we just need to start sorting. And once we've kind of designated spaces for those big categories, as we slowly move methodically through our garage, then we can put those big items with their light categories. Okay, so what happens when we do that? I'm going to grab my tea real quick. Hold on just a sec. Okay. So what happens when we do that, thank you, is we start to see what our categories are. Okay. We start to see if there might be some subcategories as well. And we also, we are starting to make progress, which is awesome. Okay. When we start to sort, we also start to realize maybe what can go. Okay. So when we start to sort things into their different categories, we realize that we have 7 snow shovels and only 3 of them still work. And we might not have noticed that if we hadn't decided to tackle the garage project today. Okay. So we might realize that we have 6 open bags of grass seed. because we've never dedicated a home for such things. And now we've got, 2 or 3 seasons worth of, and that's essentially inventory or supplies, right? But we wouldn't know that if we hadn't sorted first. So the first thing that, like I said, that we do is we sort. And this works in garages and attics and basements and crawl spaces just the same, right? So if I was emptying out my crawl space, which I really do need to do, all of my stuff's already contained, but I might have a pile over there of holiday decorations. I might have a pile over there of, toys that my kids have told me that they want to keep, even though they're grown up. We have a lot of Legos and some train stuff and that kind of stuff down there. So those would be some of my categories. So depending on where you're working on, those would be your sorting. And then we purge. Once we've sorted, then we can start to recognize where things maybe we have an excess of, okay? So as we're looking to purge things, we can ask ourselves questions, okay? Back to that definition of clutter, right? Anything that I don't need, use, or love, okay? So do I need this? Do I use it? Do I love it? Does it love me back? Is it really something I need to make room for? Okay, there is an opportunity cost from keeping things for just in case. Have you ever kept any things for just in case? Lots of people do, and I get that. But very often it means that we have not sent it on its way to somebody who could be using it actively right now. And we are still burdened with it if it's not being actively used right now. Yes, we might have a need for it in the future, and I understand that. But if you are trying to clear clutter and make some space, just in case could be harming you. And it could be certainly harming your desire to clear clutter and make some space in your, like I said, in your big projects. So just consider that the opportunity costs, the opportunity costs of keeping one thing makes us not be able to use that space for something else. That's what an opportunity cost is, okay? A couple things that I want you to think about too as we're going through this process is, as we are purging, filing is for retrieval, not for storage. What that means is we shouldn't be storing anything purely for the sake of storage. So if I was in your garage with you, I might say, as you were putting something up at the rafters, in what context do you ever expect to use that again? Or you've already said it's broken, or you don't garden anymore, or it's a tomato plant cage and you are allergic to tomatoes, like there might be things that we should not be keeping purely for the sake of storage. That's clutter, okay? And so if we have something and we're like, I cannot even imagine why anybody would ever need this again, it's very possible they won't. And so you should perhaps send it on its way, okay? So the other thing to think about is for filing is for retrieval is how to store what's left to retrieve it later, okay? So in my clutter class, I talk about our pool bag, our swimming bag. We have a bag in the closet with the luggage that has everything that you need for going to the beach or the pool. It has our beach blanket. In the summer, it has towels in it. It has goggles. It has all that kind of stuff. And so when we have the opportunity to go to the beach or to go on vacation or whatever, it's very convenient because that whole bag comes out and it's already ready to go, okay? So filing is for retrieval, right? We're retrieving all of that similar stuff at once. So it makes it very handy, right? We want to think about how to store things so we can retrieve it all together. Okay, so we're going to talk about a little bit more about that, assigning a home and containerizing, but these are the things that we need to think about. The Pareto principle also helps us to determine what we might want to keep in our garage. And that's also the 80-20 rule. If you've ever heard of somebody talk about the 80-20 rule. And what the 80-20 rule tells us is that 80% of what we need is in 20% of what we have. I'm going to say that twice too. So 80% of what we need is in 20% of what we have. So what that means is we tend to use 20% of our stuff all the time. And then the other 80% of the stuff, not so much. So if you have 10 pairs of shoes in your closet, yes, I have more than 10 pairs of shoes in my closet. But if you have 10 pairs of shoes in your closet, you probably wear the same 2 or 3 all the time. If you have 10 pairs of jeans in the drawer, you probably wear the same 2 or 3 all the time. If you have 10 appliances in your kitchen, you probably use the same 2 or 3 every day. And then the other 70 or 80%, not so much. Okay. So what that tells us is we really need to focus on the 20% of the stuff in our garage or our basement or our crawl space that we use all the time, and maybe start to look more critically at that 80% that we don't use as often. Okay. And that might be where some of that clutter is. Our clutter is probably not going to be in the stuff that we use all the time. That's being actively used, and we do need and use and love that. But there's a whole lot in our homes that we are not actively using or needing or loving. Okay. So that leads us to those purge criteria that are there in front of you. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that they are also an acronym. So they spell dues, duplicates, D-U-E-S. Okay. So the first purge criteria, as we're going through our stuff, the questions that you can ask yourself when things start to get tough in the garage, right, is how many of certain things do we really need? So I just mentioned the snow shovels. Okay. So if I had 7 snow shovels in my house, I can assure you that we will never ever use 7 snow shovels at the same time, because there are not 7 people that live in my house. Why on earth would I ever need that? And we're not usually all shoveling out there at the same time anyway. That would be great, but it's not going to happen. So why do we need all of those, especially if some of them might be broken or less efficient or need repaired or, too heavy to lift or something like that? So we can look at how many of certain things do we really need to keep. I was in a closet, or excuse me, in a garage with a client, and it was a husband-wife duo, and the husband had been the recipient of every family member who had passed all of their tools. And that's great. And he actually loved it. He thought it was really kind of neat, but he also had 4 or 5 complete sets of tools. He came from a very handy family, and that's wonderful, but now opportunity costs from keeping 5 sets of tools. He only needed 1. He could choose the best, but there were a whole lot of duplicates. And so he needed to find a way to figure out what he wanted to keep and part with the many, many duplicates of all those tools that he had. Okay. And so actually what he did is he ended up donating them to a local trades union, because very often mechanics or electricians or plumbers have to, when they get their training, they also apprentice, journeyman, that kind of thing. They have to populate their toolkits. And so all of these tools that he had were really great, but he didn't need 5 sets of them. So for him, the question of duplicates, how many hammers does one household need, right? But these are things that do come up, especially in those big spaces, because very often we have rebought something because we couldn't find it, and now we end up with 7 snow shovels or 10 hammers or whatever. Okay. So the question of duplicates does come up. And sometimes that helps us when we look at it and go, oh, I probably don't need X amount of these things. And so I'm going to let some go. Okay. The next purge criteria that you can ask yourself is usefulness. So how often do I actually use these items that are here in front of me? So if we were to, we have, well, actually that's kind of a shelf life thing, but we had sleds. We had a lot of sleds in my garage, and we did use them at a time when my kids were smaller, maybe, but not very often. And so usefulness, if I was still making space in my garage for these items that I'm never going to use, I think that's kind of a silly and not such a good use of space. I should be using or dedicating space to things that I am going to use, right? So, if you still have baby toys, even if you don't have babies anymore, or pool supplies for a pool that came down 3 years ago, those are those usefulness questions. So, will any of these items be brought out and used? If not, maybe it's time for them to go. Okay. So, and I'm not saying that they need to be thrown away. Actually, I very rarely say you need to throw things away. Sometimes they outlive usefulness to us, but they could be useful to others. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too, with exceptions and shelf life. So like I said, sometimes things have just expired for us, or we are no longer using them, but somebody else could. When we did do our crawl space, oh gosh, probably 3 years ago now, we still had the bassinet in my crawl space from our kids. And we had kept it because of nieces and nephews and things, but it turns out that if my nieces and nephews came over when they were babies, they would have come with a pack and play or come with, their own stuff. So we didn't need to keep it anymore. And so once I realized that that was not ever going to be used again in our home, I posted it on Facebook and it was gone in an hour. It was awesome. Okay, free to a good home. Someone come and pick it up. And someone did indeed take it home, which was great. So if it's not useful to you, it might be useful to others. Okay. The third purge criteria that you can ask yourself is exceptions. Okay. So exceptions are the things that we may need. I'm not going to make you get rid of all of your exceptions, but we certainly don't need to have them at hand all the time. So things that might fall into exceptions are actually most of what is in my crawl space. I know I keep talking about that, but it's a good example. So my exceptions are things that come out once or twice a year. Okay. So, Easter was a couple weeks ago now, right? Or other holidays that come up. I don't keep holiday stuff out after the holiday, but it does. So it all goes back away into the containers, well labeled and such, and stacked in the crawl space. So very often we have things that are in our homes and they are our exceptions, meaning we use them once a year. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. We do use them, but very, very rarely. So in my Clear the Clutter class, I talk about my Irish sweater. I love my Irish sweater. It was a gift. It's from Ireland. It's from somebody I love. I love wearing it once a year because honestly, it's kind of itchy and it's kind of baggy and it's kind of like not necessarily what I typically wear, but I'm not going to get rid of it. However, is it out right now? No, because it's an exception and not a rule, right? So that 80-20 rule, okay? It is definitely part of the 80% that I don't use very often. Now, do I have to get rid of it completely? No. But is it even out in my closet right now? No. It's May. I'm not wearing that thing again until probably October or November, if then. So it's tucked away with my other seasonal clothing, okay, my other exceptions. And that leaves space then in my everyday for the stuff that I am going to use all the time. So exceptions in a garage might be the things that you use maybe once a year, maybe they're kind of big and awkward, and they can go up in the rafters. So, every year when we take down or bring out my deck furniture, right? It lives in the rafters of my garage because it's not like I get in and out of it often. It comes out in April and it goes back away in September or October. So and then it stays there. There's no more coming in and out until the next season. So that would be what we would consider an exception. So the things that we do use once in a while, but we certainly don't need to keep them out if it's not currently their season. Okay, so that's an exception. And then the fourth purge criteria that you want to ask yourself is, has this item expired? Expiration or shelf life, okay? So things do expire. Things in a garage do expire, right? So, things get broken, things either solidify or liquefy in a garage. You never know what you might find. There's a lot of science projects out there. But that happens. And we want to make sure that we send that kind of stuff off and packing. But then there's also the idea that sometimes things have expired to us, but maybe they would still be useful to somebody else. Okay. So shelf life, is easy to see in a kitchen or in a medicine cabinet because it's got a little expiration date on it. So other things that might be a shelf life in your garage, there might be things that you used for planting or you used for a pet that you no longer have, or, things like that. So maybe they've expired to you and maybe it's time for them to go on their way. Other things that have expired in a garage could be hardened paint or, broken items. I had a client who had a bag full of light bulbs that they didn't know what to do with. So I took them to Home Depot and had them recycle them for me. So, we have things that there was nothing more useful that was going to be happening with those light bulbs other than just take them away and recycle them. Okay. So those are 4 purge criteria that you can ask yourself as you're going through this process, right? So duplicates, how many of certain things do I need? Usefulness, am I actually ever going to use this item again, right? Exceptions, is this something that I'm going to use all the time or not very often? Okay. And then shelf life. Is this still useful to me or has it expired? Has it expired completely and it just needs to be, garbage or recycling, or maybe it's shelf life, it's expired to me, but it could go to somebody else's home. Okay. So those are the questions that you can ask yourself as you're making these decisions for your stuff. Okay. So once you've made your purge decisions, if they're going to stay or not, if you have a purge, go ahead and remove those things immediately to their destinations. If you can't just yet, then by all means, seal up that bag and put a label on there or write on it in a Sharpie to remind you where it's going to go when we can finally deliver that stuff again. Okay. By all means, reap the benefits of this hard work. And I know it's hard work. I know. And then I said we might talk about maybe. So sometimes we have a maybe item. Maybes are hard, do I keep it? Do I not keep it? So what we could do with that is we might want to keep it, but we'll store it elsewhere. Or we'll maybe put an expiration date on that. I have clients that do that with their papers. I've encouraged them and, we've talked about their papers and what to keep and what to toss, but they're just a little nervous about getting rid of them completely. So what we might do is we might put that box of papers maybe actually in the garage and put an expiration date on them. So we'll put today's date and a date 6 months from now. And if we haven't gone looking for a paper in that box, then we can absolutely, purge it at that expiration date. Okay. So that might be a way to purge or to kind of move those maybes along from your garage too, or your bigger space. Okay. Cool. All right. So we've sorted our stuff. We've purged our stuff that was going to go. Honestly, we're almost done. So the last 3 steps I think are easier than the first 2. So the third step in the process, so first we sort, next we purge. After that, we assign a home to what's left. And I find that assigning a home and containerizing, or step 4, do blend. I think that they often blend, especially in big spaces, because you really need to think about how you're going to store something and where you're going to store something. When it comes to those big items, you need to really consider both when you're tackling that. Okay. So we need to assign a home to our stuff. We also need to figure out what kind of containers we need to use to store those items. Okay. Okay. So how and where to store the items that we've decided to keep, whether it's in the garage or the basement or the crawl space or the attic. Okay. So I said to go with the personalities, decide who's going to keep what you want, how you want to keep it, how often you're going to use it. Okay. And also I want you to use what you have. I am all for repurposing, big storage containers and things like that. Absolutely take the old label off and put a new label on there when you change your mind. Why not? So I go with your personalities, meaning maybe you want new containers, maybe you want clear containers and you don't have those right now. But also please be fiscally responsible and ecologically responsible. So we don't need to necessarily go out and buy a new everything just because. Reuse what you have is also a great choice. Okay. So are you a visual person or not a visual person? So a pegboard would be somebody who likes to see their tools, on a wall in front of them. If you don't like that look, or if you like to keep your things put away, then maybe you have tool chests instead of pegboards. So these are just the kinds of questions that you can ask yourself as you're establishing a where for your things and also then how to store it. Okay. We also want to store stuff that we need every day really close at hand. Okay. The stuff that we use all the time should be within an arm's reach. And then the things that we don't use all the time, like the example I gave you for my furniture up in the rafters, that's not coming down and up and down often. Okay. So it can be somewhere more awkward to get to because I'm only going to get it in once a year and out once a year. Right. So store stuff that you need every day in and out though, real close. Okay. If you find yourself climbing to get something regularly, then maybe it's being stored in the wrong place, or maybe you're just short like me, who knows? Um, and also storing stuff where you need it. So if you have a bag of things that tends to go in your car with you every day, then having it by the back door or even in the car or next to the car might be a great place because that's where you need it every day. Okay, so that goes back to that filing is for retrieval. Cabinets on wheels creates mobility. So I actually have a client who has 4 really large chrome shelving units. So those big, like 6 feet tall, 4 feet wide, it's a lot of space. But what we did is we purchased them and assembled them, and then I put casters on the bottom. So they're all on wheels. So what's really great about that is we can pull out the one that contains all the stuff for spring and swap it out with the one that can go back towards the back now because it's all the things that we use for winter, okay, or for fall. So that's kind of nice to be able to move things around. We don't have to see all seasons all the time that way. So that might be an option if you want to do that. Rolling metal shelves are my answer to a lot of things though. So don't do it just because of me. Make sure it's something you like. But I do like that. Also designate an area in your garage at the end, right? So we were doing this when we were sorting, but by all means continue that. So designate an area for auto repair or gardening or kid toys or bikes. We built a garage in a garage for a client. We actually just built a pretty high bottom shelf for some really big storage. And then what was below that was where all of her kids' bikes were stored. So they had their own little garage space for tucking those things out of the way. And they thought that was cool. Wagons, strollers, all of that went in there. So designate a space for those particular things. Maybe each family member has their own space on their level. So, down low for little kids and up high for older folks, whatever. So again, just kind of know who is going to use your space and what we're storing. Other things to think about, especially in a garage, is that heavier items should go on lower shelves because there's less risk for toppling. And we also don't want to pull those really big containers off a shelf and then find out it's heavier than we can feasibly carry. So we don't want to run the risk of dropping things from a high height, either on us or that they would break when they hit the floor. Okay, so just things to think about. Assume that everything is going to fall. I know that's a terrible attitude, but when we start to put things away based on safety and assuming that things can fall, it does help us to recognize where things should be more safely stored. Okay. Things to think about too. Will children be in the garage after you're done organizing? If they will be, then make sure that your power tools are away or unplugged. Make sure that if there's any chemicals and things like that need to be clearly labeled and also put behind doors and maybe even locked. All of these are things that you need to think about when you are doing those big projects. So there can be, poisonous things. We don't think of, gardening supplies or cleaning supplies as poisonous, but they certainly can be. And so when we have that space that might not be as closely monitored as under the sink in the kitchen or something like that, we just need to make sure that things are safely stored. Okay. So just again, things to think about while we're doing that. What should not be stored in a garage is a good question to ask too. What should not be stored in the garage is anything that you really care about. Meaning, if you have holiday decor and there's candles, that might not be the thing to store outside where the garage might get really hot and those items might melt. If you have boxes of photos, that is not probably what you want in your garage because they could get damp and moisture, and then all those pictures are going to be stuck together and you're not going to be able to use them again. Okay. Books and papers do not do well with moisture and bugs and things like that. So all of those things are things that you need to think about when you are establishing a home for your stuff. Okay. And then next is the fourth step, which we were kind of talking about already, is assigning a home to our stuff after we've decided, or excuse me, containerizing our stuff after we've decided what we're going to keep and where we're going to keep it. Okay. Now we talk about how. How are we going to keep it? And that goes back to those questions we were just asking. We want to containerize our stuff around the items that we're storing. We want to organize it around the space that we're going to be storing them in. We want to organize it around the people who are going to be using it. So if your containers need to be clear so everybody can see inside, then that's what you need to do. Clear containers are great, though well labeled is also satisfactory for me. Clear containers tend to run a little more expensive at, you know, Home Depot or Menards or whatever. So you are going to spend a little more money on clear, but maybe you like to see. I just find I like things well labeled. I don't need to see through my containers. I just need to see the label. So that's my preference though. And the kindergarten model of organizing is open shelves with clear and labeled plastic bins. So storing like with like, okay? And the other thing to think about, especially in a garage, is where is some unlikely space? So storing things in the rafters, storing things on the wall, you know, mounting racks and things on the wall, using between, you know, our walls are unfinished, so we can use the spaces between the, totally spaced out, sorry, but studs, there we go. I'm like 16 inches to a stud, sorry, okay. But we can use that space to corral things too. You know, use that unlikely space, why not, right? So which system is the best for storage? If you Google garage storage systems, you will be very overwhelmed very quickly. There are some beautiful ideas out there, but you do not need to spend lots of money on a garage storage system. If you want to, go for it, but it's certainly not necessary. So I like cabinets. Like I said, I like rolling metal shelves. I do like wall mounted items, but that's not necessary. You know, people have pegboards, people have, we have like this, it's not really a pegboard in the traditional sense, but it's a rack to hang our garden implements and things like that on along one wall. You know, who knows what you might work. But these are just some different things that, like I said, there's lots of ideas out there, but you do not need to go crazy and spend lots of money on garage storage. If you want to, go ahead, but I didn't tell you you need to. So, so those are just some things to think about. Using your vertical space when you're containerizing, figuring out if you want to see through or not see through your stuff, that kind of stuff. All right. So those are the questions you can ask. Other things to think about with containerizing is if you're going to fit the items that you're storing, you don't want to make them so heavy, the containers, that you can't lift them. It goes back to that garbage bag analogy from earlier. So we can use containers and that's great, but we don't want to have them so full that we and whoever else is supposed to be using them can't maneuver them. Okay. And then the final step to our organizing project is maintenance. Oh boy, maintenance. Okay. Yeah, maintenance. So I worked with a client. I miss her. I don't get to be with my clients right now. I'm doing all my organizing virtually or coaching. But soon enough, I'm sure I'll be back there, which is good. But we organized her garage one summer, and then she was kind of frustrated because we had to organize it again the next summer. And I had to explain to her that that happens, unfortunately, and I understood her frustration. But what was really cool is the first time we did it, when we first, the first time we had done it at all, it took us almost a whole day. It probably took about 5 hours to organize the garage, the spring that we worked on it the first time. But when we had to redo it last spring, it took us, I don't know, an hour or two, maybe. It was really a matter of just putting things back where they belonged. And doing that on a regular basis, I didn't want to tell my client that or her family, because not everybody likes to hear that, but doing that on a regular basis, maybe even, you know, twice a year instead of once a year, or, you know, once a week or once a month, putting things back where they belong and making sure that, you know, the rubbish is moved away or donations are dropped off or things like that. that's maintenance. And maintenance goes a long way to not have to do these big projects again. So I've talked about, getting out in our garage and doing some things like that, but we've already got all of the structures in place. So for us to really do the garage, yes, there would be things to clean up and tidy up, but swapping the snow blower out for the, bring the lawnmower out and the snow blower away and sweeping things up and, putting some of the winter stuff away and it doesn't take that long because we've got the big pieces in place already. Okay. So maintenance is easy, way easier than organizing, but it is essential and it is forever. But because it's easier, it shouldn't be that big of a project every time. Once you get the big things squared away and you know where things belong, then the next time you need to tackle your project, your garage or your basement or your crawl space, honestly, for us, our crawl space is just rearranging some things and pushing it back. So we have a little more room up front. That's it. It's not going to take long. It might take two of us because there's some climbing involved, but it won't take long. Okay. So maintenance is very important, but it's not that hard. Once we've done the hard work, maintenance actually is pretty easy, but it is important, very important. So we want to have a system for things to leave our house regularly. So regularly scheduled purge or organizing. Maybe we do the garage a couple times a year now, that kind of stuff. So we can have ways to keep that equalizing going all the time. And then review your projects regularly just to make sure that they're still working for you. So we bought a used car in March before all of this happened. And so it meant that we needed to, rearrange who parks where in the garage and where the bigger car sits and where the smaller car sits and things like that. So we reviewed around our needs. And now we might store, some of the bikes a little differently because now there's more room behind one car than there is behind the other. Who knows? But that is part of that review regularly and also that equalizing. That's what Julie Morgenstern talks about when she's talking about equalizing, is making sure that things stay equal. Sometimes they go up and sometimes they go down, but we still want to get back to normal is what she's talking about. So like I said, equalizing is super important, but it's way easier than the actual organizing is. And it's nice chance to, when we do equalize, it's a nice chance to kind of make sure that things are still working the way that they're supposed to be working. Okay, it is 8:15, which was our designated scheduled time to stop. So, and I am completed, but I'm going to hit the stop share button. And so hopefully that will take me back and I will see, there's Annie, thank you. I will see if there's any questions or anything that you guys need to ask me about. So I'm going to hit stop share.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So if you have any questions, there are a few places that we can do this. We do have a small group. So if you'd like to ask the question yourself, there is an option. If you click on participants, then you can raise your hand and I can unmute you so that you are allowed to talk. There's a Q&A box at the bottom that if you click on that, you can ask a question or you can type it into the chat and I'll relay anything that is typed to Colleen so that we can get answers for you. And I did look up the books that you mentioned. We do have the Julia Morgenstern book.
I see that. Thank you.
At the library. So when we can check books out again, you are more than welcome to do that, but we don't have the other ones. So if you'd like it, please put in a request and we'd be happy to hopefully put that on order for you.
Very cool. That one is nice because it's specifically garages, but it's not necessary, in my opinion. It's nice, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, I'm going to give people a few seconds just because it doesn't let us know if anybody's typing.
Sure.
Like that.
No problem. And you did get a chance, or you will. I know I was late in getting you the handout. So sharing that with everybody and also drawing their attention to that organizing page. So I'm gonna, let's see. I'm gonna try to screen share again. There we go.
Excellent.
So here is the recycling guide that I mentioned. and I just update it when I get new resources. I started it back last summer. And so now if somebody calls me and tells me such and such is not collecting anymore, or here's a new resource, I just add them all into here.
Fabulous. Very
All
cool.
kinds of different things in there. And we did just get a question, didn't we? Sorry about
We
that.
did. So our first
I'm gonna
question
stop the
is,
share. Okay.
do you like hooks on ceilings of garages for bikes off season and other big items that are off season, like coolers?
Well, maybe I really do need to have this in my garage next time, because if I did, you would see that, yeah, actually we have, I don't know why we have 6 bikes and 5 people that live in my house. Actually, I don't know if my son can hear me. He knows why. He's a bike guy. He likes them. But it is very cumbersome come winter, right? And so during that season when we're not using the bikes, okay, that's one of those exception items. They're so big and they take up so much floor space. Do use hooks for the bikes above the cars. Now, the 2 cars that are in my garage are actually kind of tall. So there's a designated area at the back of our garage where we don't, walk under, if you can imagine that. And that is where more of the bikes are hooked. So a couple more are down now than they would be. Oh, um, a couple of them are because we're using them, right? Because it's spring. So we're not using those hooks as much now, but we do use those off season. So yeah, absolutely. And I hadn't thought about doing coolers up there, but those are big and awkward too. So if it's an off season item, you absolutely could. That's not a bad idea. I would Maybe I would bungee. I don't know if I'd want the hook, the handle. I'd worry about the like breaking the handle off somehow. But that would be a great use for, that vertical space and getting things up and up. So good idea. So the question was hooks in the ceiling for bikes and coolers, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, absolutely. Installing them might be a hassle. They're actually pretty easy, but once you install them, then you can use them a million times over for lots of different things. So,
And
and
we,
the recycling guide. Okay.
yes, so I put that back in there again. I think the first time it may have just gone to our panelists, but now
That
you all
doesn't
should be
help.
able to see it. I will email that to you as well, just in case that's something that you'd like to. You can copy and paste it from the link on the side or from the URL on the side, or I can email that to you.
Thanks to the Schaumburg Library.
You're welcome. I did want to let you guys know about a couple of upcoming events, seeing as we don't have any more questions. But on Friday, we'll be doing the Great Mothers of History. That'll be on Friday, May 8th from 1:30 to 2:30, but that one will be available to stream at any time after that point. So you are welcome to do that on your own time as well. And then next Tuesday, so we're trying to do our general adult programs on Tuesday evenings and Thursday afternoons. So keep those dates clear. We're adding stuff frequently. But next Tuesday, you can join us for the language of flowers. So in the Victorian era, people communicated using floral arrangements to say things that they otherwise couldn't say in a very restrictive community. So Marcy Lawton and Raleigh will be teaching us about the codes that were used during the Victorian era. And that'll be next Tuesday, May 12th at 7 p.m. in Zoom. So you can go ahead and register for those if you haven't already.
That is cool. I like that.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us this evening, Colleen. And thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks, everybody. And yeah, follow up, check out the website, subscribe to my newsletter. That should be a drop down right when you get there. You don't have to. I'll never know if you don't. So, but if you would find that useful, I'd be happy to add you to it. So thanks, guys.
It's a good one. I find it very useful.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
I suffer from analysis paralysis quite badly.
Oh, you're not alone. That's why there's a term. So, all right.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Good night.
Good night. All right. Good evening, everybody. Take care.